Hello everybody, how are you guys doing? This is Rob of Rule of Two Review. Welcome back to the channel. I hope you are having a wonderful day. And today we're going to talk about something that, yes, is not about Metroid. It's not about No More Heroes 3, although I am playing that game and it is just so good. But instead I want to talk about something that's actually a little bit more in the news, which I really haven't done a whole lot of the past few months. I've kind of been shying away from covering like relevant day-to-day big sort of news happenings. However, this is something I actually do want to touch on, and it has to do with the conversation around Nintendo's online service, some of their legacy consoles and legacy content that's available on it, and also kind of how that wraps into this Nintendo Direct conversation about a possible Direct happening in the month of September, which I think most of us expect will happen. And there's some exciting prospects about what's going on, and there are some things that I think Nintendo definitely should be doing. There are rumors or some people who thinks that they are doing this thing, and I really want to see it happen, and so, yeah, I want to discuss it with you guys. Of course, before we jump any deeper into today's topic, I like to always remind you guys that I am always trying to grow the channel here on Rule of Two Review. I upload every single week. I cover all things Nintendo, I cover all things Metroid, and I discuss all things gaming. So as you watch this video, if you seem to like what I'm doing and what you hear, then I hope you will consider subscribing to the channel. So of course, as you can tell, what I really want to focus on is this idea of Nintendo adding more legacy content to the current offerings available on the Nintendo Switch online service. Now, to be fair, this is actually something that I discussed, I want to say maybe 3 or so weeks ago. There was a little bit of an update and a conversation happening at that time, and I did touch on some Nintendo Switch online offerings and briefly discussed them adding new consoles, making a new library of consoles available on this service, and how Nintendo even recently had a quote saying that they need to continue to look into doing those kinds of things to make the service kind of seem more valuable to consumers, which is very much true. I think we all agree with that. And now, over the course of the past week, there's been a conversation brewing about Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance, or maybe a combination of all of the above, finally being made available on the online service. And that is something many of us have asked for a while. I personally would love to see it, and I have some thoughts on if they should or shouldn't do it, or if they will or will not do it. Now, I do have thoughts about this that I've had for quite a while that very much predate this current conversation and this current week, but to be fair, when we look at the conversation happening right now that has been going around this past week, it seems like the genesis for most of it does have to do with the conversation that two people who are friends of mine and people you guys are probably familiar with, Nate the Hate and also MVG Modern Vintage Gamer, they had a discussion on their podcast that they do regularly, which I will link below for you to listen to, where they discussed it a little bit, and they very much went into the kind of more of the technical side, talking about the different emulators that Nintendo may or may not be using and have been found in the source code or whatever for the Switch that allows for the NES and Super NES games that they currently use, and how that could also be used for N64 games or for Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. And, you know, I know those guys pretty well. I've been on several podcasts with them on the Spawncast in the past. Really great dudes. MVG is super smart with this stuff. The guy's a game developer. I mean, he knows what he's talking about. And so it's a very interesting conversation. A lot of it goes over my head because you guys know I'm not a very tech-savvy dude, so once we start talking about emulators and the different, you know, tech sides of those things, I just get lost, man. My eyes glaze over, and all I care about is it going to happen or is it not going to happen? And so definitely listen to that video and that podcast for sure. But I will say that because they just sort of had a conversation about what's been found in the source code and what they think could or couldn't happen or should or shouldn't happen, it seems to have been picked up by a lot of other people, and everyone's been talking about it. And to be fair, I am certainly kind of doing my own version of that today, right? But instead of really diving deep on exactly what they talk about with the emulators and all that stuff, I just want to more go into the fact that I certainly think that Nintendo absolutely needs to do something like this, Game Boy or Game Boy Advance, or of course, hello, N64 games, These need to come to the Nintendo Switch Online service, and yeah, I do think there's a great chance this Game Boy stuff could happen very soon. Now, you guys know that I've shared in the past my very unpopular opinion that I don't think that the Nintendo Switch Online service currently is like a ripoff or not worth the $20 a year, even with, the features it may be missing, or the fact that it only has a handful of NES and SNES games available. I'm like, you know what, $20 a year, man, I do not care. I just want to be able to play games online whenever I choose. It's nice having NES and SNES games. $20 a year is a third of the price I'm paying to the other two guys, and I don't use their any services any more or less than I do Nintendo, so again, it's an unpopular opinion and I know this, but I'm just not losing sleep over Nintendo's online service for the Switch and what they're charging for it. However, I can still acknowledge that when you separate price from the conversation, that yes, Nintendo Switch's online service does not really compare in overall quality and in features, library, I should say, the amount of features it has compared to Sony and Microsoft, and obviously what you even get on like the different PC platforms. Like it's just not up to par in a lot of those areas. Does it work? Yes. Is it nice having legacy content in some way available? Yes. But it's not quite the same. And so when Nintendo talks about having to keep the service valuable in the eyes of the consumer and having to constantly change and evolve it and add to it, the idea of adding other old consoles to the service is the number one thing we think of, and it is the number one thing that I think they should do. Now everyone's talking about, is it finally time for Game Boy or Game Boy Color or Game Boy Advance or whatever to come to the platform? And I absolutely think that yes, it is the time, and yes, they're probably going to do it. The real question is, how would they bring Game Boy titles over? Would they see the Game Boy and the Game Boy Color line as one line and keep that separate from the Game Boy Advance line? And to be fair, they are two different consoles. Like the Game Boy Advance was really the next-gen successor to the Game Boy and Game Boy Color family at that time. And I think that sometimes maybe some of the younger people out there really get confused and don't understand that, like, Game Boy Color was the same as the Game Boy. It just added some very light color to some games. But, like, the technology as far as the power and capabilities was no different. Really, the Game Boy Advance was the brand new machine with a new library and a whole new power level. And it was awesome. Like, the Game Boy Advance is fantastic. So they probably would keep them separate, but boy, wouldn't it be great to get like 10 Game Boy games and also 10 Game Boy Advance games or something right at the launch of this service. I think that would be fantastic. And now it's been a couple of years since the service has been around, and it's been a couple of years since NES and SNES games have been available. We've discussed how the offerings of those consoles are kind of getting slimmer and slimmer as time goes on, and it's not exciting to people or convincing people to pay Nintendo for the service. So if they were to add something like the Game Boy family of consoles, or of course, again, N64, that's going to be very enticing to a lot of people and definitely keep people signed up for the service and probably convince people to sign up for it who aren't currently paying for it. Now, would Nintendo decide to start charging more for the service if they add new consoles like Game Boy consoles and N64 and stuff like that? Maybe. Maybe, you guys. I think we probably have to prepare ourselves for that to happen. Again, provided it's not an obscene jump in price, I personally won't care. If it went from $20 a year to like $25 or $27 a year for the service because they've added Game Boy and Game Boy Advance or even 64 games or whatever, I won't mind. That's fine for me. I think a lot of people will push back, but like I said in my last video, I also still think that most people who push back would probably still continue to pay for the service. So Nintendo is probably okay with some temporary bad PR to make that much more money. And using Game Boy games is the perfect thing. We've been asking for Game Boy games for so long. If they roll that out in the next couple of weeks or months or whatever, it's going to be a huge win for Nintendo, and I really do think there's a chance it happens. Now, like I said at the beginning, this does sort of relate to the Nintendo Direct conversation happening as well, because it's, about to be September as of tomorrow, September 1st. And that's crazy to think about, by the way. I cannot freaking believe it's September of 2021 already. Holy cow, it's insane. And being that it's the month of September, everyone is laser focused on this quote-unquote September Nintendo Direct. And to be fair, for like 5 or 6 years in a row, they have done Nintendo Directs in September. And I think in 2018, before Super Smash Bros. Ultimate launched, I'm pretty sure that they did 2 Directs in the month of September. One was a general Direct, and the other was a Smash specific Direct. I believe that is what happened at that time. And so, yeah, here's the thing. I think there probably will be a Nintendo Direct in September. You know, I haven't talked about Nintendo Direct predictions in a long time, and I don't really want to make this video about that, but I think it's worth noting that as September is creeping up, and as everyone starts talking about expecting to see a Direct happen in the month of September, I will tell you, like I just said, yes, I think one will probably happen this month. And also, if there are going to be Game Boy games coming to the Nintendo Switch Online service, does a September Direct be an ideal time for them to announce it? And to me, I say maybe. I find that to be a 50-50 shot. 50% chance it shows up in a September Direct, 50% chance that they just make a 5-minute video totally separate from a Nintendo Direct where they announce, hey, we're upgrading the online service, and along with that, are Game Boy and Game Boy Advance games. I think both of those options are possible, and I even think both options are actually pretty exciting. I'm jazzed at the idea of a Nintendo Direct, guys. I mean, I love gaming, I love Nintendo, I love Directs. It becomes so exciting every time we have one to look forward to, and new surprises and updates on current games. And obviously, we're now in like the final build-up to Metroid Dread, and I feel like Metroid would probably have a pretty significant presence at a Direct if they chose to do one. Although, I still think that a separate Metroid Dread-focused Direct is also possible. Just something that's like 10 minutes long, 5 to 10 minutes, focused just on Dread, like a last info dump kind of on that game. I think it's possible, but I also think it could show up in a regular general Direct in the month of September. And so, yeah, I want to see that happen. And I think that, yeah, maybe we get this, you know, announcement of Game Boy games coming to the Switch Online service. Like, we're many years into the Switch's life. We're 3 or so years into the online service. It's time for them to make a big push and a big change and evolution of the ecosystem of the Switch and of the purpose of the online service. And so, you know, they eventually did the cloud save things, you know, they added new games to SNES and all that, and at this point, we need a bigger shift, and to me, Game Boy games is the perfect thing for them to do. And so really, there's not too much else to say right now about it because it's all speculation. Like I said, a lot of the Game Boy conversation came from MVG and Nate the Hate, just having, you know, a conversation about some of this emulator stuff that's going around, and other news outlets picked it up. To me, it was just a good conversation between two guys who, like I said, I know fairly well, just talking about this stuff and having their own theories and predictions. It wasn't news the way it seems like some people might have picked it up as actual news. However, again, separate from that, I do think it makes sense for Game Boy games to come to the Nintendo Switch Online service, or 64 games or whatever. And with the Nintendo Direct probably on the horizon, maybe we see it all kind of come together and happen at the same time. And it could be really exciting and a lot of fun. So this is what I think. These are my opinions. What do you guys think about what I discussed today? What do you expect to happen in September? Do you think Game Boy games are coming to the Switch? Do you think we're getting a Nintendo Direct? Whatever you think, talk about it below. And with that, this video is a wrap. Thanks, of course, as always, for tuning in, guys. This is Rob of Rule of Two Review, and I'll catch you next time on another video.